a president seeking the power to kill citizens, even in America, and then his political enemies start dying mysteriously, that pretty much convicts him right there that he was seeking this power. I mean, could we see the implementation of NDAA taking place? We saw Judge Andrew Napolitano, who was anti-war and anti-Republican and Democratic establishment, with some of the highest ratings on Fox Business, fired. We saw the same week Buchanan fired. And he said he was told, don't criticize the war, don't criticize what Israel's doing. So I'm seeing a purge, and I've talked to high-level people in the media who've been told, leave Obama alone. Basically, Rupert Murdoch is being blackmailed by the Justice Department over his crimes in England. And sure enough, we now see a son leaving England, people getting arrested. I'm not saying what they did in England was okay. It's just that I think we're seeing an internal power structure battle, because they're obviously for the same global corporate fascist system, but they're fighting over who gets to control that trough. What's your take on that?
Well, look, I think this all started with Bush when we had the unitary executive basically become the law of the land, that the White House enjoys sovereign immunity, even over the Constitution of the United States. And then Obama's done nothing to give up any of those powers. As a matter of fact, he's taken on even more powers. For example, Obama is currently prosecuting at least 7 people under the Espionage Act from 1917. Now, this is the law that Woodrow Wilson used to go after people who thought we shouldn't be getting into World War I on behalf of the United Kingdom. And it was, of course, it was upgraded in 1948 by Senator Pat McCarran. Of course, it was the McCarran Act was finally passed in 1950, and that had to do with further establishing the national security state during the Alger Hiss investigation. So what we have are a Cold War and a World War I law being used now to stifle people in the government from reporting wrongdoing to journalists, and we still have the government trying to put a New York Times reporter in jail for not going before a grand jury to reveal his sources, Jim Risen. So in this respect, Obama is worse than Bush when it comes to this whole frontal attack on freedom of the press in this country. Now, would they go the extra mile and start doing things to journalists or bloggers or anyone else who they find is a threat? I'm still of an open mind, because I received, like I say, I received 3 credible threats, and I took seriously. So I would not put it past them to do that. But I think we have to wait before we, start saying anything else. Let's wait to see what the LA Medical Examiner's Office has to say.
Sure, but again, I go back to that point that I made right as you were coming on. The fact that within 2 hours or a little bit less of him being announced dead, they were saying natural causes, nothing to worry about, move along, move along. And any other time I've seen it, like with Gary Webb or other cases you mentioned, when they do kill somebody, they immediately announce that it was suicide or natural causes when there is foul play.
I'll tell you, I was almost as surprised to hear who his father-in-law was, Orson Bean, the old panelist on To Tell the Truth, who I think was one of the first people who indicated that it might have been from natural causes. But I frankly thought that Orson Bean had died years ago. So I was almost as surprised about that in this case. I mean, it's very bizarre.
And wasn't Orson Bean even blacklisted back during the Red Scare?
Yeah. Yeah, he was an aspiring actor in Hollywood who was accused of attending Communist Party meetings. Okay, so, here we go full circle. And he was sort of blacklisted in the 50s. So his career really had to do with appearing on, as a panelist on To Tell the Truth and The Match Game with, Bud Collyer and Gene Rayburn.
Beyond bizarre. Now, I always love the wild card here because we don't do pre-interviews with you, obviously. But you did, right before we went on, mention that you were at the CPAC event and you talked to Mr. Sinclair, and he said he did talk to Andrew Breitbart. So tell us about that, and then briefly, any other things you're investigating right now.
Yeah, I spoke to Larry. I spoke to him at CPAC, but I talked to him this morning, and there was an event called a bloggers bash at CPAC. I was not there, but Larry was there, and he told me the next day that he had spoken to Breitbart, and Breitbart had told him about wait till March the 1st about something. Now, in Breitbart's speech to the whole CPAC audience, he said that he said something about some sort of evidence, might have been photographs or video about Obama, but I frankly wasn't paying attention. But I did speak to some other folks who were there today, and they said absolutely that he did refer to that during his speech. No,
we have that clip. In fact, I was going to play it at the end of the interview. Do we have that clip right now? Yes. Yeah, let's go ahead. Can we play that where he can hear it? Okay, great. Yeah, no, here's the clip. In fact, we put this out yesterday morning. We dug up where he told 3 different sources, yeah, I'm going to release the communist stuff on March 1st. Obama's going to really not like this. We're going to take him down. So, yes, he did indeed say and do that, Wayne. Here is that clip of him at CPAC.
And so what do we get now in Barack Obama? Well, I've got videos, by the way. This election, we're going to vet him. I've got videos. This election, we're going to vet him from his college days to show you why racial division and class warfare are central to what Hope and Change was sold in 2008. The videos are going to come out. The narrative is going to come out that Barack Obama met a bunch of silver ponytails back in the 1980s, like Bill and Bernadine Dorn, who, equally radical, said one day we're going to have the presidency, and the rest of us slept while they plotted and they plotted and they plotted, and they oversaw hundreds of millions of dollars in the Annenberg Challenge, and they had real money from real capitalists.
So there it is, Wayne. You were there but missed that. Yeah. But no, it's not a rumor. There it is.
Right. And as I say, look, there's a lot of questions about Bill Ayers himself, whether he was in fact also a deep plant for the U.S. intelligence community to, basically root out, confirmed members of the Weatherman faction of the SDS.
Well, why did Bill Clinton pardon so many of convicted communist bombers who had actually bombed police and people? That does point towards them actually being operatives.
Yeah, and look, even Bill Clinton, we know that when he was at Oxford, he went over to Moscow, and it was thought that he was ratting out members of the National Students Association. We know that the National Students Association was jam-packed full of informants. That the leader of the National Students Association included a later congressman named Allard Lowenstein from New York, was working for the CIA at the same time that he was a leader of the National Students Association. This was a CIA front, and of course, the whole issue was to be invited to these communist-sponsored World Youth Conferences, and every place from Havana to Belgrade to Moscow and other places to start dossiers on actual rank and file card-carrying Marxist-Leninists. So Clinton himself was thought to have turned over some information to the agency.
But it's not just they're infiltrating, as you just pointed out. Sometimes they're leading the groups. They want to create their own opposition. It's like creating Al-Qaeda. They're not just infiltrating it. It's full spectrum dominance. They're creating and controlling all points on the compass so they can control the outcome.
Right. It's just like the FBI now setting up these people who supposedly Muslims who they're saying, we're planning some sort of an attack we find out that the FBI is supplying him with the weapons, with the cash, with the, everything. And this is sort of like engineered from the very beginning by the FBI, and they get some dupe or a patsy to go along with it. And then they charge that individual with some sort of conspiracy to commit some act of terrorism. It's happening all the time these days.
Wayne, in closing, what are some of the other big stories you're working on right now at WayneMadsenReport.com?
Well, the big story I broke yesterday was the fact that the warrantless NSA wiretapping program still exists. It's being used to target journalists and elected politicians primarily. And because NSA, because of the revelations about this program, which was codenamed Stellar Wind, by the way, it was never called the terrorist surveillance program. When Bush got caught doing it during his administration, they put the word out, oh, this is called the terrorist surveillance program. It was never called that. It was called the program. Then they tried to backload the terrorist part into it to say, oh, yeah, but we were doing it to catch terrorists. They were never using it against terrorists. I got very good sources on this that said they were using this to go after journalists, people in the government who were leaking information to journalists, and elected politicians. And now, since NSA got caught, they've shifted the responsibility and the operations over to the U.S. Cyber Command, which happens to be also led by the same individual who leads the National Security Agency. In this case, is General Keith Alexander. So they've just moved it over to the cyber surveillance side of the house from the traditional NSA signals intelligence operations.
Which, of course, you worked in the NSA. Now, remember, same thing happened 9 years ago when Poindexter, the convicted crook of Iran-Contra, got caught spying on everything, our credit card purchases, phone calls. He was bragging. So there was a big hubbub because he was bragging to the New York Times. They were trying to post 9/11, just kind of hide it in plain view and sell the idea of total surveillance, just like they tried to sell torture in the name of fighting terror. And when he got caught doing it, they just moved it over to a private group in Virginia, which was just their front. So it's always like whack-a-mole where it just jumps around, Wayne.
Yeah, and now we got to look at Stratford, too, with these this recent release of their emails. It's very clear that, look, again, it's like the WikiLeaks stuff from the State Department cables. Look at the material. A lot of it's based on gossip, hearsay. Look, even so, the Stratford emails, the people that were sending in this information, their English was, horrible.
Well, yeah, let me stop you right there. Isn't Stratford really just a megaphone to put out Pentagon propaganda so they can act like, look, private intelligence groups are saying this? Because Stratford's based here in Austin. They even had a local radio show on 590, a piece they would do. And I would listen, and it just sounded like propaganda, not real intelligence. But then looking at these emails, it's like big news in Politico and everywhere today. Oh, my gosh, there was a sealed indictment against Assange. You said that on my show 8, 9, 10 months ago. Then I saw it in papers, mainstream papers. All Stratford was doing was reporting on what was already in the news, and now the media is like, it's a private intelligence group. It's like God said it because it was in an email, and you read it, it's just a bunch of garbledy-gook.
Yeah, and they fed this stuff directly into networks like CNN and Fox would pick up on that. We know who their subscribers are now. And basically, it's the old mighty Wurlitzer where the CIA used to feed stuff directly to the media. They even had reporters on their payroll. The mighty Wurlitzer was to put this stuff out there, disinformation, and it looks like it's just been privatized and given off to companies like Stratford, and also remember Blackwater had its own intelligence operation, Total Information Systems, which did the same type of thing.
By the way, they just popped in my ear, Rob Dew. I've been out of town for a week and a half, and he just told me I was mentioned in a Stratford email. Come on in here, Dew. This is because I saw some YouTube comments going, Jones, they call you a kook in Stratford, and then I just didn't even believe that. and then now you just, next time you hear this, tell me, come in on the air. Tell people what.
We put it in on your desk.